Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this morning, our Let Them Play press call. We are thrilled to be joined by a fantastic slate of participants from the WNBA to the NCAA to high school sports to Athlete Ally, our incredible partners, as well as the Human Rights Campaign and Gender Justice. So thank you so much to everyone for joining this morning. Without further ado, I will introduce Human Rights Campaign President Alfonso David.
Thank you, Wyatt. Thank you all for joining us today. I would especially like to thank our partners at Athlete Ally and the athletes and the coaches who have joined us on this call. Joining us today are Cheryl Reeve, who's Minnesota Lynx head coach, Nafisa Collier, who's Minnesota Lynx forward, Cece Telfer, who's a former NCAA champion and transgender athlete, Alana Bozier, who's an NCAA athlete, Aaliyah Shank, who's an NCAA athlete, Zoe Zephyr, who's a transgender high school athlete in Montana, Ann Lieberman, who's the Athlete Ally Director of Policy and Programs, Erin May Quaid, who's the Gender Justice Advocacy Director. This is a moment of national crisis where the rights and the very existence of transgender young people are under attack. This year's state legislative session marks the highest number of anti-transgender bills in history, more than 50, of which target the ability of transgender athletes to participate in sports. Unfortunately, we have already seen 3 of these anti-trans sports bills pass in Tennessee, Mississippi, and Arkansas. And similar anti-trans sports bills have been may be sent soon, I should say, to governor's desks in Montana and Alabama. Just this week, the legislature in Arkansas overrode the governor's veto on HB 1570, which is an unprecedented bill that denies age-appropriate and medically necessary and potentially life-saving gender-affirming care for transgender youth. The bill is not only wrong, but it cannot withstand legal scrutiny. Like the bathroom bills and the bills targeting marriage equality before them, these bills are nothing more than a coordinated effort by anti-LGBTQ extremists spreading fear and misinformation about transgender people in order to score cheap political points. These bills are not only spurious, they are dangerous to transgender athletes and trans youth across the nation. And we are engaging with organizations and individuals who value fairness, equity, and inclusion to speak out and take action, which is why the Human Rights Campaign sent a letter recently to the NCAA, which is the national organization that regulates student athletes, asking the organization to reaffirm its previous commitments to non-discrimination and inclusion by condemning anti-trans sports legislation and making clear that it will not utilize venues that are inherently unwelcoming and unsafe to LGBTQ people. Now, in response to our letter, the NCAA informed us that they are concerned about these bills being filed all across the country. They understand that these bills are harmful to transgender student athletes and that these bills conflict with NCAA's core values of inclusivity, respect, and equitable treatment of all individuals. The NCAA also reiterated their policy requires championship host sites to demonstrate that they will provide an environment that is safe, healthy, and free of discrimination. Now, we are grateful to President Emmert and the NCAA for past and present leadership to foster diversity, equity, and inclusion in sports. Their voice in this space has been important in stopping hateful legislation from taking effect, and in some cases has helped to reverse discriminatory laws on the books. At this time, though, we are asking the NCAA to do more and to use the power of their visibility to affirm and support transgender and non-binary athletes across the nation. To be clear, the bills we're talking about are seeking to deny the very existence of transgender people. Legislative leaders are perpetuating stigma that fuels an epidemic of violence against our community, At least 44 transgender and gender nonconforming people were killed last year, more than any other year since we have been tracking. And in just the first few months of 2021, we have at least 11 transgender and gender nonconforming people who have been killed. This stigma is also directly affecting transgender athletes. As highlighted in a recent article detailing the steps the NCAA had to take to protect the safety of one of its transgender athletes, including hiring bodyguards. Furthermore, these bills seek to override NCAA's own policies, clearly violate Title IX, and are antithetical to the NCAA's own mission of providing athletic experiences that are safe, that are fair, that are sportsmanlike, that are sportswomen-like, that are sports people-like, and enrich the academic experience. 550 student athletes wrote in a recent letter organized by Athlete Ally and by 2 students on this very call that these bills, that the harm of these bills, that they will cause, it will be felt by generations of athletes to come. As we have seen all recently, there is much to be done to increase gender equity in sports, including pay equity, access to opportunity, lack of access to coverage and visibility. Instead, these bills only further division and hate, while actively harming women, girls, and non-binary athletes who only seek to compete to build community with their peers. These bills damage the reputations and the economies of states that advance them, and they tarnish the standing of athletes all around the world. At the end of the day, the anti-trans bills and the slate of anti-trans legislation that we're seeing across the nation are the antithesis of our nation's best values. They're about fear and disinformation, and about policing gender, and about policing bodies, about trying to push trans and non-binary people out of existence. Imagine if you were a trans kid in Arkansas, trying to help your family survive a pandemic, trying to do well in school, trying to figure out high school and even the prom, or even trying just to get through the day. Now imagine that some lawmaker makes a law that says you don't belong, that you don't really exist. It's horrifying. It's horrifying, and we should all sit with that inhumanity, because trans kids belong, and we should be building a world where these kids feel welcome, supported, and can be their authentic selves. We are asking the NCAA to stand up with us. We certainly appreciate the affirmation they have taken in the past, but we're asking them in this defining moment, we need them to help all of us live into our collective values and show all of us that we're showing up for young people. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Wyatt as we go through to the next speaker. Thank you all again for joining us.
Thank you so much, Alfonso. And now we will turn it to Gender Justice's Erin May Quaid. Erin?
Thank you so much. Good morning. My name is Erin May Quaid. May Quaid is my last name, and I'm the Advocacy Director at Gender Justice, a Minnesota-based nonprofit that seeks to advance gender equity through the law. Thank you for being here today. We know that transgender children participate in sports for the same reason as anyone else, for the physical and mental health benefits, the invaluable lessons of teamwork and self-discipline, the lifelong friendships, and honestly, just to have fun. Recently, anti-LGBTQ hate groups have launched an aggressive legal, legislative, and messaging campaign meant to perpetuate the demonstrably false notion that transgender girls participating in sports pose an existential threat to girls' sports. That is not true. This push has elevated harmful narratives about transgender youth into the public sphere, including personal and at times deeply inappropriate conversations about children's bodies. And as we know, there's no such thing as hate that stays neatly focused on one group. The rigid hyper-scrutiny that's used to discuss the bodies of transgender kids today are already familiar to many Black and brown girls whose bodies have been scrutinized and policed for generations. It's enough, and that's why we're here today. Here in Minnesota, we're the first state in the nation to protect transgender people in a state human rights act, and our Minnesota State High School League has had policies allowing children to participate in sports that align with their gender identity for almost a decade. In fact, since the Minnesota State High School League adopted this formal policy, girls' participation rates in athletics have increased. And this is not unique to Minnesota, this is happening in other states too. We know that like kids everywhere, transgender kids thrive when they're treated with dignity and respect. Being a kid is hard enough, We don't need politicians making it even harder for kids who are transgender and singling them out for increased bullying and harassment. But we need our champions for all kids. That means institutions, including the NCAA, and individuals. And I'm honored to introduce one of those champions, both literally and figuratively. She's a champion for the trans and LGBT community, and she's the head coach of the four-time WNBA champions Minnesota Lynx. Please welcome Coach Cheryl Reeve.
Thank you, Erin. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. This really important time in all of our communities. I'm here today to talk about this notion that somehow these legislators are concerned about protecting women's sports. And I've been involved in women's sports for a long time, since the 70s when the Title IX legislation passed. And what I'm here to tell you is that, what's really harming women's sports is an overall lack of investment in whether in resources for athletes, for female athletes, opportunities to coach in the profession, lack of pay, so severe pay disparities. Those are the true threats to women's sports. And this starts from scholastic competition all the way through to the WNBA and professional sports. And additionally, the notion that the motivation of transgender athletes is to gain scholarships or a competitive advantage is simply a false narrative. This diminishes the athlete overall. And we have a really special athlete here today that I'm really proud of that I'll introduce next. But I can tell you this, when I travel across the world to find championship level players, it is so much more than some sort of physical attribute. I can tell you this, when I am vetting a player, skill for the game of basketball is so much more important. Look at every one of our championship teams. We were never the most athletic team. What we have is what's on the inside. Championship teams are built from players that have this internal drive, motivation. So it really diminishes the athlete to suggest that somehow, being bigger or stronger gives you this advantage. I want to play against those players every day of the week with players that are undersized and the ones that have this internal drive to be great. That's what makes championship level basketball. That's why we've been champions 4 times. Simply put, trans inclusion makes our sports, our teams, and our communities stronger. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today to speak on this. I'm very, very proud to introduce to you one of our very, very special athletes for the Minnesota Lynx. Nafisa Collier is everything that I just talked about. And I want to give her the opportunity to speak on this from her perspective as an athlete.
Thanks, Coach. I'm so excited to be here with you guys and talk about this. Sports are such an important thing, especially in my life. I mean, I would not be the person I am without growing up with sports. And the vast majority of student athletes aren't going to play professional sports. So denying that opportunity to others to grow, socially, to make friends. I mean, almost all of my friends I made through basketball, growing social skills. I mean, growing confidence. The confidence that I gained playing basketball is so huge. Transgender inclusion is so crucial for the health, safety, and well-being of transgender kids who are already at a higher risk of anxiety, depression, and dysmorphia, suicide. And some transgender kids say that playing sports have helped to save their lives. So, I mean, like Coach said, there's no advantage for the bigger, faster, stronger. It's what you have on the inside. And like I said, I think it's so important because I would not be who I am without playing sports. And I consider transgender women, my teammates, not a threat. The NCAA has to take action and withdraw all athletic competition from states considering harmful and anti-transgender sports bills. So again, I'm happy to talk with you guys, and I'm going to hand it off to Cece.
Hi guys, thank you so much, Nafisa. Thank you for having me here. And my name is Cece Telfer. I am a Division II national champion. And as a former NCAA athlete, I definitely want to thank the NCAA and commend them for how they treated me as an athlete. newly to them and their environment, and to know that I'm not a threat, but we are definitely asking the NCAA and you guys to do more. As an athlete, as a trans athlete, first of all, I'm not a threat to women's sports because I am a woman. Second of all, there's no sort of advantage that personally I have or I see. The joy and beauty of finally embracing myself and being in a sport that I love and being on that line with the women I'm supposed to be with, and it's enlightening, and it's prevented me being an athlete has prevented me from many things, from many distractions, from harming myself. Like it's deeper than it is. Athletics is a way for people to get out and get away from negativity and just breathe. And I really think that the NCAA can do more, and that's all that we're asking. So thank you guys so much for having me on this talk, and I'm happy to be here and I'm happy to chat. I'm gonna hand it off to Zoe next. Sorry.
Hello. Hi, my name is Zoe Zephyr. Wanted to make a small correction. I'm 32 years old, so I'm a little past being a high school athlete, but I did wrestle in high school and in my youth prior to my transition. I'm also a trans woman. I want to start by saying that I'm grateful to be a part of this call with so many people who are incredibly high-level athletes and who have dedicated their lives and careers to sports. My journey in high-level athletics was a lot shorter, but I can say with the utmost certainty that I am the woman I am today, thanks to the sports I played in my youth and the sports I continue to play in adulthood. I was a wrestler, a high-level wrestler, from the ages of 4 to 18. Between ages of 4 and 18, I won multiple state championships, was ranked nationally at various periods, and was recruited by colleges across the country. But that's where my story in high-level athletics stops. I turned down collegiate opportunities to wrestle to go to a university closer to my family, and that was that. But even though I never wrestled at the NCAA level or Olympic level, I still understand deeply the value that sports have and the lessons they can teach. The story I always tell is that in my high school wrestling room, there was a sign above the door where we practiced, and it said, "Every day I leave this room a better wrestler and a better person than when I entered." And every day after practice, we would slap that sign on our way out as a testament to the hard work we put in. And my coach would say, "If you don't believe you've become a better wrestler, stay behind and we'll do some drills. If you don't believe you've become a better person, stay behind and we'll talk about it. We'll work through whatever it is you're going through." And for me, that is the lesson, that is the power of sports. That's the lessons that stick with you into adulthood. As I mentioned at the start, I'm 32. My championship days are well behind me. These days, I work at the University of Montana and I play on intramural teams, highly competitive intramural teams. But when I think back to my time wrestling, I don't think about the rivals I beat or the championships I won. I think about that side. I think about the hard work I put in every day and how I worked hard to be a better wrestler and a better person, and how now in my adulthood, I work hard every day to be a better person, to understand that I can be bold and be brave in the face of adversity and trust the process, that if I work hard every day, I'll see the results. And that's what I want for my transgender sisters and brothers across the country. This bill would, the bills in Montana specifically where I'm at, would ban me from playing on intramural teams, but they would also strip the opportunities for trans kids across the country to learn the lessons that I learned. Trans girls are girls, trans boys are boys. They deserve the opportunity to play sports, to work hard, to become better athletes and better people. And I encourage everyone, the NCAA and all the media in this room, to oppose these bills and help my transgender sisters and brothers live. Thank you. And I will pass it off to Alana.
Thank you, Zoe. That was awesome. So my name is Alana, and I am a current student athlete at Washington University in St. Louis, along with Aaliyah, my teammate. So earlier this semester, Aaliyah and I spearheaded a letter to the NCAA challenging the organization to pull championship events from states engaged in anti-trans legislation. We noticed more and more states slated to host championships were putting anti-trans bills on the table, but the NCAA was just staying silent. We felt that we had to make some noise about it among our student athletes here and across the country. We couldn't just sit back and watch as the right to play sports was being stripped from our fellow athletes. We ended up getting more than 700 student athletes from around the country to sign the letter because we were all frustrated and disappointed by the lack of action taken. Continuing to let these states host events, states that create these hostile environments for student athletes, was sending a message opposite to the NCAA's mission of inclusion. I know that for me, competing has always been something I've looked forward to, and especially now during the pandemic. And it's important and imperative to know that we are safe and supported in the NCAA no matter where we travel to compete. However, it's impossible for women athletes to feel safe and supported in an environment where their personal identity and integrity is questioned. The reality is many of these bills cannot possibly be enforced without inviting policing and bullying of all student athletes who do not meet stereotypes of gender, and could empower any person to force any student athlete to undergo invasive physical exams or hormone tests in order to prove their gender, whatever that means. Simply put, trans women don't threaten women's and girls' sports. They're my teammates who want to play for the exact same reasons that I do, to have fun, to improve ourselves, and just, to make friends and be physically fit. And so with that, I like to pass it off to Aaliyah, my teammate here at WashU.
Thank you, Alana. Thank you to everyone who's here today. I just want to reiterate what Alana said about our motivations for putting together the letter. We saw that these states are bringing anti-trans athlete legislation to the table. And as student athletes in the NCAA, as NCAA student athletes, we felt that it was a responsibility to speak up when we saw these bills that could potentially threaten our teammates, our families, team culture, and just sports as a whole. Sports are a lesson learning and developmental experience for kids. Personally, I started playing sports when I was 4 years old, and I can tell you that when I was 4, I was not focused on endorsements or being a professional athlete. I just wanted to have fun. I wanted to have fun with my friends after school, and I just wanted to play. Sports teach really important life lessons. They teach teamwork, they teach leadership, they teach self-discipline and self-control in stressful environments. And these are all lessons that trans kids would be robbed of if these bills and these legislations get passed. If Republican legislators are interested in protecting women's sports, these bills don't show it, but potentially here's how they can do it. Support funding for women's sports programs in states, programs that are often underfunded and underappreciated, hamstringing the opportunities for competition for women. Champion pay equity for women and speak out in support of pay equity in sports specifically. Speak up and legislate against sexual harassment, abuse, assault, and misconduct in women's sports that has been pervasive because of the likes of Dr. Larry Nassar and others. And I just want to reiterate, trans girls are girls. Trans kids are kids. They're not a threat to women's sports, and we're proud to call them our teammates. At WashU, on the track team, we have a saying that our team is our family, and we support each other, protect each other, and love each other no matter what. Trans girls have been competing for a long time without incident, and so the NCAA needs to take action and withdraw all athletic competition from states considering anti-transgender sports bills. And now I'm going to pass it off to the person who helped us draft this letter and disperse it. Here's Ann Lieberman.
Thank you, Aaliyah, and thank you everyone who's on the call today and for your incredibly powerful statements so far. My name is Ann Lieberman. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm the Director of Policy and Programs for Athlete Ally. At Athlete Ally, we work to make sure everyone has equal opportunities in and access to sport. And that is because we believe in the power of sport to change the world when it welcomes and includes all people. It is no exaggeration to say that sports saved my life. As a non-binary person growing up, a very awkward queer kid in Pittsburgh, I didn't yet know the words for who I was, but I did know that sports was one of the only places where I could be myself. For an hour each day, the bullying stopped, the pain fell away, and I was part of a community of my peers. In 2016, the NCAA Board of Governors came together in the wake of pulling championship games from North Carolina as a result of HB2 to make a definitive policy around hosting championships only in states that can clearly demonstrate how they will, quote, provide an environment that is safe, healthy, and free of discrimination, plus safeguards the dignity of everyone involved in the event, end quote. From Montana to Florida, we are at yet another critical point as anti-transgender legislation is sweeping the country. We've seen 3 states pass athlete bans and over 25 additional states that are considering similar pieces of legislation. Many of these states are also slated to host NCAA championships in the next several years. Every day, the leadership of the NCAA stays silent, these hateful bills gain momentum. The time has passed for simply monitoring the situation. If you say nothing, even though you have clear policies and practices that support inclusion of trans student athletes, you are implicitly supporting these bills. I want each and every young person in this country to be able to live without fear and to play sports as who they truly are. I want to thank everyone again for being here, and I'm going to pass it back to Wyatt, who will facilitate our Q&A session.
Thank you so much, Anne, and thank you to all of our participants. Now we're going to provide the opportunity to ask any and all of our participants questions. The way that this will work is if you will send me a message in the chat, I will call on you and give you a chance to ask your question, whether it's directed at a single participant or directed at the group. While I give folks a minute to pop into the chat and ask questions, I will mention that this call is being recorded and we will distribute it afterward for coverage purposes and for reference purposes. So once again, thank you to everyone for being on the call, and I will give folks a moment to hop into the chat to answer or to let me know that you have a question, and then I will call on you